Hello, everyone, and welcome to another AccuColor webinar by BenQ. Today, we are thrilled to welcome back Kawai Lin, who will be presenting the seminar today on photographing the Northern Lights. We're so grateful to have Kawai back, and we're going to take all your questions at the end of the seminar, so hold off on those. You can still send them in the question and answer portion of the GoToWebinar platform, and we'll be able to get to those at the end of the presentation. So I'll hand it off to you, Kawai, and I'll turn off my camera now.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Thanks, BenQ for having me today. Today I'm going to talk about the photographing the Northern Light. For 10,000 of years, people have been seeing and documenting the amazing display that light up the night sky. There have been hundreds of myths, stories, and theories that explain what we now know as the aurora borealis. But no one until about a century ago, the Norwegian scientist Christian Birkeland, who was the first to explain the cause of the aurora, which is the connection between the sun and the earth. And today I'm very happy to share with you the excitement of seeing and photographing the aurora. So, well, when I say 10,000 years, I really mean that. And this may be the earliest depictions of aurora, about 30,000 years BC, that was found in the cave. So after checking around, there's this guy here, the Uncle Henry, who committed the war vandalism. You can see some drawing that looks like aurora in the sky. So just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Kawai. I born and grew in Malaysia. I went to medical school in Ukraine, so I lived in Ukraine for 6 years, and then I went to graduate school in Sweden. So I lived in Sweden for 5 years. So my background is medicine. I was a research scientist at Princeton University from 2012 to 2016. And then later on, I decided to fire my boss in 2016 and become a full-time landscape photographer. So my job is to travel around the world. So I do photo workshop, I do photo tours, teaching, seminars, all around the world. So I have no regrets of doing a 9-to-5 job. I love traveling, I love photography. I think combining my job with travel and photography is just as cool as you can ever imagine. Okay, so today I'll be focused on the 3 major areas of photographing the aurora. The prediction of aurora, how to predict when it's going to happen, and the technique of shooting the aurora, and some compositional skill in shooting the aurora. So aurora borealis, or northern light, are the interaction between the charged particles from sun and the molecules in the Earth's atmosphere. So the patterns and the shape of aurora are determined by the changing flow of these charged particles and changing magnetic fields of the Earth. So they are like moving curtains of light, sometimes move very rapidly, sometimes move very slowly. So this is the basic of how the aurora happens. And I'm not going to dive into the scientific talk, but I will just bring a few very important parameters for predicting the occurrence of aurora borealis. So both Earth and the space weather are important factors decide whether you will see the aurora or not. So when we talk about the Earth weather, the season-wise, autumns and the winter, which is from September to March, is the best timings in the northern hemisphere as the nighttime dominate. While when we talk about the weather, cloud is a boss. You want a clear sky. There's no discussion here. On the other hand, space weather is equally important. There are many factors, but at least 3 of them here that are most important and give you the highest chance of success: the KP index, the aurora overlap, and the interplanetary magnetic field. So let's dive into each of them here. So the most informative site about predicting aurora is the spaceweatherlight.com. So this is what I've been checking when I'm running my photo tours, when I run my aurora workshop. Many people like to use the apps on cell phone that will tell whether aurora is happening tonight or not. However, most of the forecast information are coming from here, spaceweatherlife.com. And so I prefer to read the data for more precise prediction of aurora. So let's talk about the KP index. KP index describes the disturbance of Earth magnetic field caused by the solar winds. So the index range from 0 for very low activity to 9 for very intense activity. Okay, so KP5, so we call the KP5 or higher the geomagnetic storm. Just a fun fact, when a geomagnetic storm happens, you will see amazing aurora show in the sky. It's fun for aurora chaser, it's fun for photographer, but in the high geomagnetic storm activity, it might come with $1 trillion price tags caused by the power system failure, the spacecraft failure, the satellite navigation failure, and high frequency communication blackout. So when this geomagnetic storm happens, it's not so, it doesn't look good for other people other than the photographer. So, so the higher the KP index, so the higher the KP index, the broader the aurora oval. We look at the aurora oval here, the green circle here. So the higher the KP index, the broader it is. So you can see the aurora in the further north. Let's take an example here. So for example, if you are in Reykjavik, if you look at my pointer here, if you're in Reykjavik in Iceland, you will need the minimum of KP3 to see the aurora. If you are in Lofoten in Norway, which is my pointer here, so you will need a minimum of KP2 to see the aurora. However, if you are in London, which is somewhere here, or in the north of Germany or north of Poland, you will need at least a KP7 to be able to see the aurora. So KP index indicated where you will see the aurora. So if you are in the American United States, if you look at the map of the United States, you need a KP7 to see the aurora in the Boston and in New York City. And if you are in the Washington D.C., you need the KP9 to be able to see the aurora. So it seems like the United States is not a good place to see the aurora. Okay, so on the Space Weather Live website, if you look at this section here, so there is a KP index forecast, and this is for a particular time frame. If you click on more data, you will see the prediction of the KP index in the particular time frames, whether it's what is going to happen in the next hour and so. So once you click into this KP, this more data here, you are able to see more detail in the hourly prediction of KP index. So it's important to note that KP index here does not definitively predict the strength of the northern light. It nonetheless provide a good idea of what to expect for aurora happens. So the next thing I want to talk about is the aurora oval. So I mentioned a little bit about aurora oval in the previous slide. This is another good indicator for aurora forecast. If you look at the aurora oval in the spaceweather.live.com and click on more data here, you will see the shape of the aurora oval, how the aurora oval looks like in the particular time frame here. So for example, this day in this particular time, if you are in Lofoten here, if you look at my red pointer here, you have high chance to see the aurora. However, if you are in the north of Canada here, which is not covered by the aurora oval, you have lower chance to see the aurora here. So the oval doesn't stay in one place and it will rotate around the magnetic field of the Earth. So the next thing I want to talk about is IMF, the interplanetary magnetic field. If you scroll down on the Space Weather Live homepage, you see the real data of the solar winds data. There are a few things to look at, like the solar winds, the speed of the solar winds, the density of solar wind, the interplanetary magnetic field. So the most important things you want to check is this interplanetary magnetic field. And there are three axes in the IMF, interparamagnetic field, the B, X, Y, and Z. And B, Z, which is a north-south direction, is the most important indicator for the aurora activity. The BZ value can be facing the north, which is the green in the chart, or facing the south, which is the red in the chart. You need the BZ value to be negative or facing the south, which is the red in the chart here, to be able to see the aurora. And so just a bit of science behind this IMF here. So when the BZ value is south facing or negative in the chart, so so where the negative is in the north and the positive in the south, and so it will connect to the Earth magnetic sphere where the positive are in the north and the negative in the south. So the opposite pole attract each other. So therefore, the solar plasma can enter the atmosphere that result in the in aurora. So if the IMF value is north facing or positive value in the chart, so the positive in the north and it cannot enter the magnetic field because the positive value of the magnetic field is plus in the north, so the same pole doesn't attract each other, so there's no aurora to happen when the BZ value is positive. So just to recap what I'm talking just now, you want to see the negative value. You want to see the negative value. Prefer -5 or lower to be able to see the aurora. The lower the better for the aurora activity. So the continuous of -10 or lower are the good indicator for the geomagnetic storm to be developed. Another indicator here is a time when the solar plasma hit the planet Earth. So there's a time here. So if you read the chart, the text here, blah, 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 with the current speed, it takes a solar 56 minutes to propagate from the discover to the Earth. So this data here are live record by Discover spacecraft, which is located at one point, and depends on the speed of solar winds. It takes about 40 minutes to 70 minutes to travel from the spacecraft to the Earth. So in this case here, it's 56 minutes to travel from the spacecraft to the Earth. So for example, here, if you see the red peak appear on the right margin of the graph, you know that in 56 minutes, it will arrive on Earth. So this is a good indicator that you know if you know that when you see the minus value here, you know that in 56 minutes the aurora will happen, and so this is a good indicator that when you should get out of the door instead of just standing outside and blindly waiting for the aurora. Okay, so just to recap what I've been talking just now. For example, if you are in Lofoten tonight, and what is the chance that you see the aurora, and how do you predict the aurora, whether it will happen tonight or not? So of course you need a clear sky here, no cloudless day, clear sky, and in Lofoten, because it is located in the further south north, so you need a KP2 or higher to be able to see the aurora, and you have to check the aurora all while. You make sure the aurora is covered the area of the Lofoten, and you have to check the BZ value and make sure that it is -5 or lower, so that aurora is going to enter the Earth atmosphere. And the BZ value, the chart of BZ value also offer the timing when the aurora is going to happen. So these four are the good indicator that you are not going to sleep in tonight. So the aurora is going to happen tonight. Okay, so so as I mentioned earlier, autumns and winter, which is from September to March, are the good months to see the aurora because you have longer night time in the north hemisphere. And my favorite season, however, is winter, which is around January to March. Why winter? If you look at the chart here, if you look at the image here, the left was photographed in Stettinen in autumn, while the right side was photographed in Lofoten in the winter. So the presence of snow is a plus, as the white on the mountains add the three-dimensionality and the contrast to the landscape Of course, if you don't like the cold, autumn is for you, and you still be able to create a great image in the autumn. Personally, I don't travel to Arctic to the northern hemisphere in November and December because of very short or almost no daytime. So people always ask me that how the aurora is going to look like tonight and how long it's going to last. So this is a simple but question with no exact answer. Anything can happen. So the aurora can happen boom for 1 minute and then gone. That's it for the night, and it can last for 5-6 hours or longer for the whole night. It can be strong enough to lead out the ground, or it can faint and is distinguishable with the cloud. And the color patterns and movement can be highly unpredictable. So the short answer is anything can happen. So when we talk about the technical part of the camera setting of shooting aurora, both camera setting and the focusing are the key to get a good shot. If you're unfamiliar with the night photography, I suggest you to take a screenshot of the following slide by your phone and keep them in a cheat sheet in view. Focusing is very challenging for beginner photographer. You need to play with a camera in the dark. The headlamp can be a good helper, but you might be yelled by other people in the field when you turn on a headlamp and while people are shooting at night. So practice, know your camera is the best solution. Know how to play your camera, how to set all the setting in dark. So when we talk about the focusings, I summarize them in five simple characters: F, M, P, R, C. You can connect these five characters with your imagination, but to to talk about the focusings. So talk about focusings. Let's get into detail here. F for focus at night. There are a few ways to focus at night. So if the moon is present, you can auto focus on the moon or distant object like the distant street light or the house. You can also use the autofocus to focus on a distant object in the daytime and tape the focusing ring, fix it, okay? And you can also turn the focus to infinities and then turn the focus ring back a little bit to achieve the infinity focus. Or you can use a live view to point to the bright star and use the manual focus to turn it until the star is pinpoint. Once your focus is switch to manual focus, so you lock your focus on the lens. Once you have achieved the focus, check if the star is pinpoint. So just point to the bright star and zoom into on the live view or take a test shot and check the star. If the star is pinpoint, you are in focus. If the star is a big ball blurb, then you are not in focus. Then you have to refocus using the previous technique. And then you have to refocus when you change the focal length or if your lens is not a par focal length. And check the focus every 5 or 10 shots. This is very important to check your focus every 5 or 10 shots. I just want to recap that because in one of my, I remember in one of my workshop, one of my clients get a nice shot of aurora, and when he gets 100 shots of aurora at night, and when he get back to the hotel room, when he checked the photo, the first 10 images were sharp in focus while he was walking around, running around, changing the compositions and the focal length, and then all the rest of the photo are out of focus. So you don't want this to be happen to you. So check the focus of your picture every 5 to 10 shots. So camera setting. Again, 3 things to remember, just like the daytime photography, the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. Just put them in the sequence here. So you want to switch your camera to M, the manual exposure mode. Aperture, So aperture, you want it wide open because you're shooting at night, you're shooting the night sky. So you want it wide open, you want more light going into the camera. The second thing you want to set is your shutter speed. For the fast moving aurora, 5 to 10 seconds. For the slow moving aurora, you can set to 10 to 20 seconds or even 30 seconds. Okay, so this is very important. If there's fast moving aurora and you set the shutter speed to 20 or 30 seconds, the aurora will just blur out, result in no detail and it's just a patch of green light in your picture. So you want to make sure you have the right shutter speed. And the last thing you want to play with is the ISO. Start with ISO 1000 and check your image and adjust your ISO accordingly. If the aurora is too bright, then just lower ISO. If the aurora is too dark, then just a higher ISO. So ISO is the last thing you want to adjust. Okay, and then keep adjusting your shutter speed and ISO based on the movement and intensity of aurora. Aurora can go fast or slow, slow to fast. You have to keep adjust your shutter speed based on the movement. And aurora can go from dim to bright or bright to dim. So you have to constantly adjust the ISO based on the intensity of the aurora. And so just an example here. So the solar wind discharges from the sun at speed of about 400 kilometers per second. So when they enter the Earth, they collide with particles in the atmosphere and move in a slower speed. So depends on the speed and the density of solar winds and the interaction with the atmosphere, the movement of aurora can be very fast and looks very different from second to second, or it can be very slow and change slowly across the sky. So these three images here are just about 1 minute apart. So you may notice the pattern doesn't change too much. And in this case here, you can use longer exposure, as I mentioned just now, 10 to 20 second exposure, and you still retain the shape, the detail of the aurora. So this image here with 30-second exposure, because I was using ultra wide angle lens at 11 millimeters, so it's even more forgiving. And the advantage of using a longer exposure in slow moving aurora is that you can use the lower ISO. And these are the example of fast moving aurora. And the shows from the beginning to the end just in 5 minutes. So you can see how it changed from 11:40 p.m. to 11:43 p.m. It changed from second to second. So in order to capture the pattern of aurora, I need to use a much faster shutter speed of 5 to 10 seconds to freeze the pattern of aurora. If you use a slow shutter speed like 10, 20-second exposure, you won't see the pattern, you won't see the detail of aurora as it's blurred out by the aurora movement. So it took some time and experience to have a good nose. Once you figure out the optimum camera setting, the best thing to do is to capture the sequential movement of aurora. So just press your shutter speed or set the continuous shooting in the intervalometer. I have not mentioned tripod yet, but I assume that everyone knows that how important the tripod is in night photography or in aurora photography. So in this example here, you see the aurora is changing every single second, every single minute. And what I did is just to set my the continuous shooting and just keep shooting until the aurora is gone. So the advantage of getting a sequential image is that you can select the best frame and showcase as a single image. Not every image a good looking aurora, maybe 1 or 5 or 6 frame are the best in the best shape or the best detail of aurora. So that's the one you want to show to your audience. Or you can convert it into the time-lapse video that show the movement of aurora. So time-lapse is the best way to impress your audience. And many people worry about the presence of the moon in the aurora night. So in terms of exposure, moon can be very useful. With the presence of the moon can illuminate the foreground, lower the contrast between the sky and the ground, allow to create a well-exposed image in one single shot. So this is the advantage of shooting aurora with the presence of the moon. Without the presence of the moon, the sky can be too bright and the ground can be too dark. and creating a high contrast scenery, you may need to bracket to get the perfect exposure of the sky and the ground separately and perform the exposure blending in the post-processing. So you do need a full moon to get a nice shot of aurora. Around a quarter moon is just ideal. Sometimes full moon can be problematic as it's often casts a harsh shadow on the mountains or your foreground elements like high power bulbs hanging in the sky. Some people might worry about moon's light affecting the visibility of aurora. When the intensive aurora is strong enough, the moonlight will have very little effects on the aurora. So just an example here, this is a single exposure image with the help of moonlight that lit up the snowy mountains and the foreground. And these are unprocessed image photographed in the same location, but in different night, with and without the presence of the moon. You can see that it's obvious. It's pretty obvious that with the presence of the moon, you just need one single shot to get a well-exposed image. Without the moon, you need a one shoot to the sky and one shoot to the ground. One shorter shoot of the sky and one longer shoot for the foreground, and then you have to blend them in the post-processing. Some area like the street light here are very difficult to shoot, very difficult to fix it, even in the digital blending or bracketing. So these are the edited image. This is a single shot of the aurora with the presence of the moon, and this is the exposure blending with two shots, one to the sky, one to the ground, and as I mentioned here, the high contrast area. The street light here are very difficult to fix. And here's another example with the night without the moonlight. It's autumn, there's no snow, and the mountain is very on the far side in the histogram. So everything in the foregrounds are dark and so bright in the sky. Some people try to do the light painting, but it doesn't really work because the mountain is so far away from the camera. So the only solution is to do the double exposure. So here what I did is one exposure to the sky, so 10-second exposure to the sky, and then I do a 90-second exposure at f8 to the ground. Okay, so and then I blend both image in the Photoshop to get a nice image of the aurora with a nice foreground element. So, one of the most common beginning mistake is that there's no location scouting. If you drive around at the aurora night, either in Lofoten or Iceland, you may see people just stop their car in the random place on the roadside and set the tripod to the eye level for photographing aurora. So the resulting picture are just a green patch of light with a random crappy looking in the background. So what's the point to travel all the way to Iceland or Norway? So it's important that you spend a lot of time to scout the locations, to scout the ideal location for photographing aurora. But sometimes shooting at the sky without foreground can show the beauty of a green lady. It doesn't offer the sense of location, and not to mention the artistic side of aurora photography. So what I prefer to do is to shoot aurora in a good location. Again, location scouting and composition of aurora are equally important to prediction and photography skill of aurora. So when we talk about the location scouting, just like daytime photography, scouting is the most important part in your creative process. And it involves a lot of research beforehand, and often takes much longer time in the field than the actual shooting session. So do the scouting in the daytime, and the ideal location for aurora photography is the wide open sky toward the north. There's no blockage of the north sky by the mountains or tree or big buildings or anything big nearby, because the aurora often start dancing in the northern sky. And you want to find out the possibility of compositions like the good foreground elements and background elements, like the mountains, the nice mountain in the background, or nice rocks or leading lines in your foreground. If you're shooting seascape or fjords or in Lofoten, you may want to know what to expect in high tides or in low tide. And most importantly, scouting for safety purpose. You don't want to go to the new place and you don't know that there's a deep cliff in front of you. That's not too fun. So let's take a look into this. A few examples here. For example, the seascape in Lofoten. So this is a famous Scott Sandon beach in Lofoten. So this image was photographed during a low tide when there's very interesting patterns in the beach, as well as a refraction in the shallow water, and interesting rocks can be your foreground elements as well. If you come in a high tide, there's no you're not going to see any of the patterns in the foreground here. Everything's underwater. And this is another location in Lofoten. This is Utakra Beach in Lofoten. With the high tide, you may capture the boulder soaked in the water. With the low tide, you will see the boulder on the sand. So it gives you very different composition opportunities in low tide and high tide. So this is why you want to scout the location beforehand. And mountains, the size of mountains matter. The size of mountain in your image cannot be too big because if it's too big, if it take up most of the space and blocking the aurora, it can not be too small. Obviously, it doesn't look too amazing when the mountain's too small in your image. So again, scouting a location is the key to success. And tree are one of the best subjects in aurora photography. These are the examples from the monster tree in Finland by my good friend Ari Hitman. So the reason I love to shoot trees and with aurora is that you can always adjust your distance and the angle of shooting depends on where the aurora is going to happen. If aurora happens behind your camera, you can move to the other tree and shoot the other side of shoot the opposite side. So it gives you the maximum flexibility, no matter where the aurora is going to happen. So, so this is another example here. And if aurora happens on top of the head, like the corona in this image here, just point up and use the branch of trees to achieve the frame within frame compositions. I just want to recap that the composition is more important than the aurora and things else. Without the composition, it's just a patch of green light. So the question is that when you think about the composition, what would you like to express? You need an idea. You want to show the majestic mountains of Lofoten or Iceland. You want to show the serenities of the winter landscape, the refractions, or the crazy forest, or dynamism of water. And in the next section, I would also want to talk about how to achieve a good composition using ultra wide angle lens, using this concept called a composition trial. And again, back to locations, scouting, the more you know about location, the better you can do in competition. Okay, so especially you are going to make, especially in the dark, sometimes you have to make a quick decision in the dark. The better you know the location, the better decision you can make. So the refractions, you have to be alert of possibility of refraction. It can be a calm water of the fjord, it can be the lake, it can be a small patch of water. If you see the refraction, don't let it go. Try to make it happen. Refraction can offer you some of the best shots you can ever imagine. It can be extremely rewarding. It's often produce a stunning result because the refraction often creates symmetrical compositions that bring the sense of balance, which is somehow synonymous to peacefulness and tranquility. Just an example, a few more examples here about refraction. It always looks good with the refraction. So we talk about the usefulness of the moon, but the moon itself can be also a part of your image. So be creative what you can find in the field. And this is an example that with the use of smaller aperture, you can include the moon in your image. So with the use of f14, like this image here, the moonburst can be a very interesting element in your image, along with the winter landscape, the mountains, and the aurora. This is a big bonus added to your image. You can always use plan this type of shooting, predicting where the moon is going to appear using the photo pill apps. I'm not going to talk about the detailed photo pills here, but if you're interested to learn more of this app, there are plenty of the video of the tutorial on the YouTube channel. And the moving water can be highly dynamic, but it's always challenged to capture the moving water in the dark. So this is an example here of capturing the moving image. So this example here make of two images. First is shooting. First is the sky, which capture the continuous movement of the aurora. Okay, and then once I get enough shot of the sky, and I focus on the ground. So what I did here is to wait for the water to enter this little channel. So once the water is rushing in, I click my shutter speed and to capture the movement of this water flow. So in the post processing, I would just blend both image together, and this is the resulting image. So the water flow serves as a very strong leading line here, as well as a sense of dynamism added to your image. And this is just an example here with the aurora and the moving water in the foreground element. So when we talk about using the tripod, most people like to extend tripod to eye level, and that's not the way you use a tripod. This shooting shooting your landscape photography or raw photography at the eye level rarely produce great image, period. So it just gives you a comfort time in the field. The key is that finding a nice foreground, go low, move your feet, bend your knee, you will see the totally different world. So just an example here, the foreground can be anything from big boulder here, like the example here as well, using big boulder as a foreground elements, or you can use the frozen lake, or the complex terrain as your foreground element. Again, the better you know the location, the higher the chance you may find a good foreground, regardless of what direction aurora is going to show up. I just want to show you an example of the image photograph in the same location, but in different conditions. So these are all with the same background elements. You can see here the same mountain, but the foreground elements play a crucial role on how the final image looks like. Okay, so these two images here, first and second image here, they were photographed during a low tide, when you can see the nice patterns of the foregrounds and reflection in the shallow water. And these two images here were actually photographed by placing the camera in the ground, even without the tripod. Okay, so the ground level offers you perfect reflections and a connection between foreground and the background element. Extreme low angle eliminate the space in between them. So this perfect reflection here renders a sense of symmetry, balance, and survival. While the next two images here, this image and the next image here, were photographed in a higher angle, again in the low type. Okay, you can see the foreground and the background elements are more separated, and there's more space in between them. They're still great image to my opinion, but it render very different visual sensation. You can feel more depth in this image from the foreground, from the near to background to the far side, from near to far. And this image here, I intend to place a big rock on the right side, because the amazing arch of the aurora and reflection of the arch are to the left. So therefore, both render the balance to the image. Okay, so you can also interpret that all the line and the aurora, the pattern of the sand are pointing toward the mountain and the rock to the right side. So the last thing I want to share with you today is how to create a visual story with using the composition trial. So I'm going to use this image as an example. So to tell a story in landscape photography is very different from other branch of photography. For example, in trail photography, in portrait photography, the story can be told straight by capturing the moment. For example, the unexpected event, the expression of a face, or the interaction between two people. In landscape photography, when the viewer look at your image, you want them to see the image as a complete story by connecting all the elements, all the subject in your image together. So all the subject in your image has their own role. They are not isolated. They have to be interact with each other. So the idea of composition in landscape photography is to create an image with a story. So I'm going to explain you the concept of composition trial and how to use the concept of element selection, element balance, and element placement to create an image with a story. So let's talk about element selection. To create an image, you were given a small frame, a tiny frame of 3:2 or 4:3, depends on the ratio of the sensor. You cannot put everything inside your frame. You have to select the element you want or the element that contributes to the story of your image into the frame. This is called addition or plus. For this image here, there are just three elements: the foreground elements with rocks with the flowing water, the background elements, which is the mountain, and the aurora and the sky. Just three elements. That's it. You have to exclude the element that you don't want or not contributing to the story of an image. This is called subtraction or minus, like the rock next to like the rock next to the flowing water, the garbage or the dumpster next to this rock here, the elephant next to the mountain. Those are probably interesting, but they are not. They have no role in story of your image. So throw them away, leave them outside of the frame. So this is called subtraction or minus. It's somehow concept with the concept less is more. And what is element balance? What is multiplication? With the use of ultra wide angle lens, we are able to use the perspective distortion to enlarge the foreground elements. Okay, so in this case here, with the perspective distortion, we enlarge the foreground rocks and the flowing water here. This is called multiplication. Usually the foreground elements in landscape photography are not iconic. You can find this thing elsewhere. You can find the same rocks or flowing water in other places. So they carry very little visual weight in your image because they are not iconic. By enlarging them in the image, you add the visual weight to the image. So it can balance with other elements in your image. With the use of ultra wide angle lens, we make the mountains in the background element look smaller. So the background elements here, which is the mountains here, carry significant larger visual weight compared to other elements because it's iconic. When people see this, they know that this is the big beach in Lofoten in Norway. So it's an easy to recognizable landmark on this beach. So it carries significant larger visual weight than other elements. So by making it smaller, it can balance with other elements in your image. So once you have these elements ready, let's put them together. Let's place them nicely into your frame. So this is called the element balance. By posing a camera in three-dimensional space, left and right, up and down, front and back, you can change the positions of these elements and the relative positions in the image in a totally different way. This is how I place this elements in this image here. So the flowing water, the water flow coming in from the corner, forming a leading line that guide the viewer eye going to the mountains. And then the viewer eye will go further to the sky, where the aura is going to spread outwards, that guide the viewer eye moving in the same direction. So this process here lead your viewer eye to read the story of the image, following the path formed by how this element being placed and the implied vector in the image. So this is called a visual continuity, a way of landscape photographer tell the story, a way of landscape photographer lead the viewer eye to go from one element to the other in your image. So at this point, you may realize that the possibilities of photographing aurora are just endless. The sky is not the limit, your imagination is. And so with the years of, with what you have learned, with the technical skill you have learned, and some composition skill you've heard about just now, you can create amazing aurora image in the field. So so winter is coming. It's November right now. If you have chance to travel to the north, so this is the best timing to chase the aurora. So I wish all of you best of luck if you have chance to visit the northern hemisphere. Okay, so before I end my presentation, I would like to I would just put a little bit of advertisement here. If you want to check out my photo tour and workshop, you can go to my website kawaling.com. Under the workshop session, you can see the list of aurora workshop and other workshop in 2023 and 2024. And you want to look at more of my image, you're welcome to my website kawaling.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And last, finally, I would like to thank BenQ for having today, for hosting my seminar today. And I was just told that if you are a new BenQ owner, you can get the free 1-year membership on the Dispen One Connect Premiums. So if you're interested in purchasing the BenQ monitor, check it out, this opportunity online. So with that, I will stop here and take a question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kawhi. Well, let's give everyone a few minutes to ask some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first question from Margaret 10. Are there different elements or structures to the aurora?
Sorry, excuse me.
The first question, are there different elements or structures to the aura?
Yeah, if you mean about the color, they could the aurora can happen in different color. The most common one is being green color. So it depends on what kind of interaction between the solar winds and the particle in the atmosphere. It can result in different color. Like green is being the most common one. Sometimes you see the red colors and blues or purple Yeah.
Okay, next question from Carla. What gear can you recommend to get started, the basics?
Sorry?
Do you recommend to get started, such as the basics?
The Aurora season, what year is,
Or what gear, like equipment? You
oh,
mentioned
gear.
earlier the tripod.
Yeah, the basic being the DSL cameras or mirrors camera. Any camera can work well in night photography, but I would suggest to use the full frame camera because it's better performance in the low light conditions. It's give you a cleaner image. And for the lens, I would suggest to start with the wide angle lens, the ultra wide angle lens, because the aurora can just spread out throughout the sky. So we want the wide angle to be able to capture the whole sky. And of course, the stable tripod and the remote control or intervalometer. Yeah. So these are the basic gears of shooting aurora.
Okay, here's one from Carol. Don't your pictures with a high ISO have a lot of noise?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just unavoidable to use a high ISO. If the aurora intensity is bright, if the aurora is very bright and it's slow moving, you can use a low ISO and slow shutter speed to capture aurora. But sometimes the aurora is weak and the movement is fast enough, you have to capture with with a few second exposure. Then the high ISO is just unavoidable. Yeah. So in this case here, I would suggest um, to just clean up in Photoshop, clean up in post processing.
Okay, here's another question. You mentioned taking 2 exposures to get the background and the aurora. How do you merge them with so much aurora movement?
So so it just so so for the yeah, you can do the blending in the Photoshop. So usually when you have to shoot the 2 exposure, one exposure to the sky, one exposure to the ground, and you just bring 2 images in the Photoshop, open in the layer, and then use the layer and mask to bring up the sky and the ground. Yeah.
Okay, and then can you expand more on how you can anticipate a fast versus slow moving aurora?
Okay. It's kind of hard to explain it, but when you look at the aurora in the sky, you can see that sometimes the pattern of aurora just stay still for and it's changing very slowly. So in this case, you can use very slow shutter speed and lower ISO to capture it. But sometimes when you look at the sky, the aurora is moving very fast. The pattern change from second to second. So in that case, you have to use fast shutter speed, like 3-5 second exposure to capture the detail of aurora. So you just have to see with your own eye and decide what exposure time to use.
Okay, and here's a technical question from Don. It says here, f by 2.8 zoom adequate or fixed 14 millimeter f by 1.8?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So forgive me if my technical lingo is not up to par with photography techniques, but f slash 2.8 zoom adequate or fixed 14 millimeter f by 1.8?
Both are fine. The advantage of using the fixed lens at f1.8 is that you can use a lower ISO because of the bigger aperture. But my preference is a zoom lens. So at zoom lens with f2.8 or f4, but it gives you more flexibilities in terms of compositions. Sometimes you zoom it wider, sometimes you can zoom it tighter. It depends on how the aurora looks like. So if you want me to pick one, I would pick for the zoom lens. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. How to handle focus for foreground and focus for aurora?
So if you are doing the double exposure to the sky, you have to focus to the sky. And then on the separate shot, when you shoot the ground, you just have to focus to the ground. And when you focus to the ground, you can use a smaller aperture. Yeah, this is how I make everything sharp in focus.
Okay. Here's one from Emmanuel. What made you quit your career to go to photography full time?
Okay. Um, it's more fun to do photography than sitting in an office, right? So that's a quick answer. Yeah.
And then another one from Emmanuel. Have you ever or have you experimented any filters while taking an aurora?
No, I didn't use any filters to pick aurora because anything in front of a lens would just reduce the lights going into your camera or your sensor. Yeah, no filters at all.
And then another one from Margaret. And have you ever observed a Steve with the aurora?
I did once. Steve is actually described, I think 1 or 2 years ago, but I actually observed this once many years ago, and at that times no one know that it's called Steve. Steve, yeah. It's just once over the past 6-7 years.
And then one more from Carol. What time does the aurora usually appear?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to tell. It depends on the as I mentioned just now, there are many parameters in predicted aurora. It can be early night, it can be later in the night, it can be in the midnight. It's very hard to tell. You have to constantly checking all the parameters like the KP, the IMF data, which is the most important one, and whether the aurora overalls cover your area. So these three indicators is very important. And it's hard to tell whether these three happens in the early nights or later in the night.
Okay, Kawhi, that looks like the last of the questions from BenQ. We want to thank you for taking the time to present this wonderful seminar for us. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone else enjoyed it. We'll send out the webinar recording shortly, so anybody who missed it will be able to watch it. If you'd like to rewatch it again, you'll have access to that. Yeah, a lot of some thank yous coming in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much, Kawhi. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.